So how do homing pigeons navigate? Explainer tells us this is from the conversation on phys.org by Tim Guilford. And now it reminds me of what even Noah did from his ark, sending out a pigeon. And where was the pigeon supposed to go? I guess God directed it, but was it homing in on something? Now, homing pigeons, how do they know where they're going? We even have them being used in this here is a U.S. Army carrier pigeon. You can see that he's got a little cylinder on his back. He's carrying a message somewhere. And also used in Europe as well. Even up to the First World War, we have pictures here. Homing pigeons used for carrying messages back and forth instead of going through enemy lines. So pigeons have extraordinary navigational abilities. Take a pigeon from its loft and let it go somewhere it has never been before, and it will, after circling in the sky for a while, head home. This remarkable capacity extends to places tens, even hundreds of kilometers from its home, and is all the more remarkable to humans because we're apparently incapable of it ourselves. But we have long made use of the homing pigeon's ability, principally for carrying messages in the past, and for several decades now, the pigeon has played center stage in scientists' attempts to understand the map and compass mechanisms fundamental to bird navigation. So what have we learned? Out of direct contact with home and out of the landscape to which birds have become familiar, there must nonetheless be large-scale cues available to the navigating bird with which it can estimate its position relative to home. Many theories have waxed and waned, from reading the sun's arc to the detection of long-distance infrasounds, but there is little support for these. I mean, the ancients even knew about homing pigeons and used them, but how did they know? Anyway, magnetic misgivings. Most attractive and persistent has been the idea that pigeons can use the predictable gradients of intensity and dip angle in the Earth's magnetic field to map their position relative to known values at home. The magnetic map hypothesis is attractive and persistent, but largely without support after decades of experimental research. It is also probably false. Part of the confusion is that many birds, and probably pigeons, do have a magnetic compass, giving them magnetic navigation, which gives them the sense of direction when they cannot see the sun. A compass helps make long-distance movement efficient and is central to migration, but it cannot help you navigate if you do not know the direction of your goal. This requires a map. Unlikely as it may seem, this map turns out almost certainly to be olfactory. In other words, they use their sense of smell. Pigeons, and perhaps all birds, navigate using smell. Good nose for direction. Pigeons deprived of the ability to smell cannot navigate. Fool them with air from the wrong site, and they will fly in the wrong direction. This is what the scientists are saying. This sounds a simple thing to demonstrate, but in fact, testing the olfactory navigation hypothesis conclusively has proved remarkably taxing, and there are still experts who doubt it on reasonable grounds. But the weight of evidence from 40 years of study makes the case pretty strong. It's likely that birds learned the rough composition of atmospheric volatiles characteristic of their home area and how this varies with winds that come from different directions and are then able to extrapolate to unfamiliar places if they are blown off course or taken there by a human and released. Even over the open oceans, birds, not pigeons of course, may use odors to navigate. Closer to home, however, olfactory deprivation has little effect on a pigeon's orientation, and it seems that they switch to a second mechanism dominated by visual landscape cues. Until recently, scientists lacked the tools to observe detailed movement with sufficient detail outside the laboratory, but the advent of miniature onboard tracking technology such as GPS now allows us to follow birds with astonishing precision and unravel the mechanisms of their spatial cognition in the wild. New findings. We've now learned that pigeons repeatedly released from the same site soon learn a habitation route home which they stick to faithfully even if it's not the quickest. Different individuals learn and stick to different routes. Routes often follow linear landscape features such as roads or field margins, but are learned most effectively over landscapes of intermediate complexity. This means that urban landscapes may in fact be too complex for optimum route learning. Pair birds with different ideas about how to get home from the same place, and the result is an elegant expose of each bird's propensity to lead out or follow others. Birds that are more faithful to their own route when homing alone are more likely to emerge as leaders when homing socially. So, if the pigeon's brain contains a network of learnt routes, how are these memories required and how do they interact? Recently, my colleagues Andrea Flack and Dora Biro showed that having to learn 3 routes in parallel does not cause pigeons any additional confusion. I support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box. Route learning is memorized independently, regardless of whether the sites that they are released from are encountered sequentially, randomly intermingled, or in strict rotation. Treating the art of pigeon homing as a natural learning laboratory is a new science into which we are just taking the first steps, and it seems that we have yet to find the boundaries of the bird's abilities. Clearly, we still have much to learn from the pigeon. And this was from the conversation on phys.org. And another one concerning pigeons flying home with a map in their heads from University of Zurich. It's fascinating phenomenon that homing pigeons always find their way home. A doctoral student in biology, University of Zurich, now carried out experiments proving that pigeons have a spatial map and thus possess cognitive capabilities. In unknown territories, they recognize where they are in relation to their loft and are able to choose their targets themselves. Homing pigeons fly off from an unknown place in unfamiliar territory and still manage to find their way home. Their ability to find their way home has always been fascinating to us humans. Despite intensive research, it's not yet definitely clear where this unusual gift comes from. All we know is that homing pigeons and migratory birds determine their flight direction with the help of Earth's magnetic field, the stars, and the position of the sun. As Nicole Blazer, doctoral student biology at University of Zurich, demonstrates, homing pigeons navigate using a mental map, navigating like a robot or cognitive capabilities. Research proposes 2 approaches to explain how homing pigeons can find their home loft when released from an unfamiliar place. The first version assumes that pigeons compare the coordinates of their current location with those of the home loft, then systematically reduce the difference between the two until they have brought the 2 points together. If this version is accurate, it would mean that pigeons navigate like flying robots. The second version accords the pigeons a spatial understanding and knowledge of their position in space relative to their home loft, and this would presuppose that the type of mental map in their brain and thus cognitive capabilities. Up until now, there has not been any clear evidence to support the 2 navigation variants proposed. For their experiments, Blazer and her colleagues fitted homing pigeons with miniature GPS loggers in order to monitor the birds' flight paths. Beforehand, the researchers trained the pigeons not to obtain food in the home loft, as was normally the case otherwise. Blazer said, "We fed the pigeons in a second loft around 30 kilometers away from where they each had to fly back to their home loft. The scientists then brought the pigeons to a third place, unknown to the pigeons in completely unfamiliar territory. This release site was in turn 30 kilometers from home loft and the food loft. Natural obstacles obscured visual contact between the release site and the 2 lofts. One group of the pigeons was allowed to eat until satiated before flying home. The other group was kept hungry before starting off." Blazer explained, With this arrangement, we wanted to find out whether the hungry pigeons fly first to the home loft and from there to the food loft, or whether they're able to fly directly to the food loft. Fed pigeons fly home, hungry fed pigeons fly to the food loft. As expected, the satiated pigeons flew directly home loft, explains Professor Hans-Peter Lipp, neuroanatomist at UZH and Blazer supervisor for her doctoral thesis, saying they already started on course for their loft and only deviated from that course for a short time to make topography-induced detours. The hungry pigeons behaved quite differently, setting off on course for the food loft from the very beginning and flying directly to that target. They also flew around topographical obstacles and then immediately adjusted again to their original course. Based on this procedure, Blazer concludes that pigeons can determine their location and their direction of flight relative to the target and can choose between several targets. They thus have a type of cognitive navigational map in their heads and have cognitive capabilities. Pigeons use their heads to fly, jokes a young biologist. This was from University of Zurich on phys.org. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support.